Welcome to the PAHCOM Podcast. We are medical management radio for the solo provider and small group physician practice. PAHCOM is where medicine meets entrepreneurship. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PAHCOM Podcast, Medical Management Radio. PAHCOM is the Professional Association of Healthcare Office Management. I'm your host, Terry Fletcher. In today's episode, we're going to jump right into the topic of physician practice success and focus on that solo or small group physician practice. What physician practices are at the top of their game? Do they have secrets to their success? We're going to try and find that out today. And to discuss these questions and really look into the management of your practice, the business operations necessary for success, and a place to start, I would like to introduce Kathryn Eiler, who will be joining me on the show today. Kathryn is a certified medical manager holding the PAHCOM credential, a health information technology certified manager, physician practices, with more than 25 years of experience in multi-specialty physician practice management, medical management education, and teaches the PAHCOM webinar series on the 9 domains of medical practice management. Kathryn was also the PAHCOM 2017 Medical Manager of the Year. So, Kathryn, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Hi, Terry. It's good to be here.
Great. And thank you for all your travels and making time for us. I know you've been traveling a lot with work, and I think you said you're located in Philly, so you've got that cold weather. So, I can't really relate. I'm in Southern California, enjoying 70s weather this week. I know everybody can relate to on the East Coast for what you're dealing with.
Yes, it's pretty cold here.
So, as an industry leader and talking about physician practice management, and with the current climate of the small or solo physician practice, as it relates to finding success, I have just a couple of kind of questions that I just want to put out to you and see really how you would respond and let the listeners know what they're up against, what would be a great place to start, and just really, some insight as to where the practices need to get into the groove for success in their business operations. So I was looking at some things, just different things on the internet, different responses from different practices. And there's a question that's really kind of tough to answer. I wanted to see what your insight was. What kinds of things are key to establishing short and long-term goals in a successful business that happens to be a medical practice?
So when you're talking about a medical practice, of course, the clinical aspects are the most important aspects of getting through your short-term goals, which is getting through today, the day-to-day operations of the practice, making sure that your staff have what they need to get through the day, that your physicians have great schedules, and that you have in place a toolbox of go-to things in the event that your day gets challenging, with patient care. When it comes to long-term goals, it's a totally different game. Long-term goals include things like understanding and knowing the revenue cycle, making sure that your primary responsibilities are taken care of, but also understanding important aspects of the revenue cycle, like, what is your collections process? What do your contracts look like? The revenue cycle starts with the first point of contact. What does that look like for your medical practice? Do you understand what the impact of that is on the revenue cycle? What is the face of your practice? How does it start? How does it end? And then, again, going back to those insurance contracts, that's key right there. Understanding thoroughly what your responsibilities are. Many, many practices don't understand. Physicians really get through the day, but they don't really understand what does that matrix look like when those charges go out the door and they come back, paid or unpaid. What is the difference between, contractual fees and, what the insurance companies are paying you, and, what you're actually billing out the door. Many, many practices I go into, they haven't looked at their billing matrix in years. They are sort of winging their way through it. They don't realize that their contracts have changed, that they're updated, several times a year, that there's changes. Medicare is the only one that actually updates the fee schedule once a year, but many payers make changes throughout the year. Some of the Blues on the East Coast update their fee schedules more than once a year, sometimes twice a year, And you have to know that and understand that and make sure that you are billing above the fee schedule. I was in a practice today, and they were shocked to find out that there were at least 12 of their primary codes that they were billing exactly, getting paid exactly what they were billing out, which is never a good sign. So I would say long-term goals, understanding the revenue cycle is key. It's the most important aspect. Having key members of staff in place to assist with the organization of the practice, and having a very high-functioning, well-organized practice would be the key to success.
That sounds great. And I actually had a practice myself recently that, and it's actually in the last couple of weeks, where this staff, when I asked questions about, well, what is your fee schedule? What's your reimbursement for a certain procedure, cardiology practice? And they said, oh, we don't get paid for that one. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, we don't get paid for this couple of procedures within a heart cath scenario. And I said, but those aren't bundled or inclusive. They said, yes, but you know what? The contract that payer never pays us, so we just write it off. And so you're right. Sometimes I don't want to call it short-sightedness, but just not understanding some of the revenue cycle can definitely hinder some success there.
So that, I think, is the key to the organization of a practice and its success.
Yeah, I agree. So with some of the long and short-term goals that you mentioned, how can we help physicians understand what's important to their success with all of the changes they're experiencing, some of the payers out there that are, like you said, maybe they change their fee schedule a couple times a year and not really realizing that not everybody is Medicare, which is a little bit more consistent.
So, with that same short-term, long-term goal, understanding the revenue cycle, and the things that we've already talked about, like understanding what those payer contracts are, there's a lot of responsibility that goes with that. And so you have to make sure that you have key staff, educated staff in place that are helping you to, be on top of your game. Otherwise, if you don't, I go to practices that don't understand what that little mailbox means in Navinet, or some of the primary payers, how they communicate when there's a message telling them, we've changed your clinical policy and you're not going to be paid if you continue to use these codes. That's the second piece, I would say, where practices really struggle. And when you're talking about, helping a practice be successful, I think that's key. Many times, private practices are governed by physicians. Their physicians choose to manage their own practice. And when that happens, I think that they think that they have a good understanding of the aspects of what they do every day. But that contract management, that payer management, is a totally different ball game. And you have to have educated, highly skilled staff in place in order to be successful with that.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I have a question along those lines of why do some physicians choose to manage their own business? Because in some of the larger practices I'm in, but some of the smaller ones, I notice that the physicians are so focused on the checks that are coming in that day without really looking at the workflows and the capture and just things that are basics to a practice instead of they're already jumping to the back end. So why do they choose to manage their own business?
Well, for one thing, I think physicians went into private practice because they wanted to do it their way. They came out of residency and they saw a better way to do it, and they saw a way to be able to manage patients themselves. Many of the physician practices that we're talking about are not governed or owned by young physicians, but more mature physicians. And those physicians are sort of old school. They are of a time when it was easy for a physician to manage his own practice, where they worried about the checks coming in the door every day and making sure that piece of it was working. But that's really not the case today. Today, it's a whole different ballgame. Today, you have to know about quality benchmarks and clinical protocols, and you have to have things in place, and a full knowledge of what it is that you're getting paid for and what you're not getting paid for. You have to know when you want to do a procedure, what is the clinical policy guideline that is going to get you paid for that procedure? Many times physicians will choose a code that is not included in that clinical policy guideline, and they're not getting paid, and they really don't understand why that's happening. Physicians choose, I think, to run their own practice because the buck stops with them. They're used to being in control. They're the ultimate responsible party when it comes to patient care, when it comes to signing the checks, when it comes to reporting payroll taxes, when meeting with their tax accountant, hiring and terminating employees. They're the ultimate responsible party, and I think that they're used to that with patient care. It makes it easy for that.
Yeah, and I was, kind of taking a step back a little bit just before, since we're kind of jumping into really what the role is of the management part of the medical practice. My question is, when looking at the leadership in a small group, a medical practice, a single practitioner, or even a doctor that has less than 5 in their practice, how important is it, based on just our conversation so far, to determine that the office manager's role is just so important? I mean, I've experienced practices that do not even have an office manager. They hire, or I should say, they promote within. I've seen a lot of doctors' wives say they're the office manager for the title. But I think that it seems like some practices, and correct me if I'm wrong from what you see, but it seems like whoever's there the longest seems to be de facto office manager, not necessarily the most equipped to handle the job, but they're coming up through the ranks, and the definition of what an office or practice manager is just doesn't seem to be clear. So what's your feedback on, how do you choose key staff and determine what that role is?
So it may not be the person who's there the longest. It may be the new person coming in the door who has maybe a few years of experience, or who has some college education, or who has a certification in an aspect of healthcare that makes them a little bit more knowledgeable. Sometimes it's the person who's the most tech savvy, who can go online and do a little research, and who has the ability to look at and read a contract. Many times the person that's been there the longest may not be the best resource for a physician. Today, healthcare is one of the most regulated industries in the United States. We're second only to chemical and nuclear, industries. And when you talk about the rules, the regulations, and the requirements that we have to meet, and they change, the game changes every day. Every day a new thing comes along. We get mandated by the Office of Inspector General, by Health and Human Services, by the CMS, by Medicare and Medicaid. And people forget that Medicare is not just an insurance, it's a law. So it's not like you can say, you can treat it like it's Blue Cross and Blue Shield. It's not. It's a law. So everything that Medicare governs, every time you interact with them, you have rules and regulations that have to be followed. You have to know what those are. When you're putting someone in place at the helm of your practice, that has to be a highly skilled and highly educated person if you want to be successful. You can't wing it. Gone are the days where you can just promote, someone from the front desk and put them in that position and assume that everything is going to be okay, because it's likely not going to be okay. And you and I both know that we have experienced many practices where they're not successful and they can't figure out why, and that's the ultimate reason they're not successful. If you want
now, let's say you have a physician's practice or a physician that doesn't want to spend the money on a quality office manager. What would you say to that physician?
I would say invest first in a certification. Start with one certification. If you're struggling with coding and reimbursement, get somebody certified, through the AAPC. If you, for a certified professional coder. If you want to have a manager at the helm, get someone who is certified in medical practice management. There are certifications out there. PAHCOM offers a certification. There are many organizations that offer healthcare certifications, but start small, and that will help bring the organization to your practice. The truth is, every medical practice today probably should be run by an MBA, whether it has one physician or 5 physicians. That's how complicated healthcare is today, if you want to be successful. But does every solo practitioner or private practice physician or small group medical practice have the resources to hire an MBA? No, they don't. But they do have an opportunity to promote staff within and invest in getting them certified. Most of those credentials cost a couple of $1,000s, and I would highly recommend that they get someone at the helm who thoroughly understands every aspect of medical practice management and medical practice administration if they want to be successful.
And I absolutely agree with what you're saying there. And one of the things for the listeners, when we talk about certification or we talk about making sure they get that credential, what Kathryn and I really like to refer to is it's the part of the credential that maybe you're not aware of, that it's about the studying part. It's about the learning, the information, and what they grasp from becoming certified. It's not just having the letters after their name, because I've met a lot of certified coders that are not, I don't want to say aren't the best coders, but they have learned to take a test. And with PAHCOM and the CMM, you are looking at a completely different type of certification and credential. And as Kathryn, one of the instructors that does go through all the 9 domains, which we shared on episode 1, just really take a look at that if you get a chance at paycom.com, because some of the things that are in there and some of the information will just be invaluable to your practices as you're trying to choose that key staff. But Kathryn, I pondered that question many times, just as far as trying to figure out who is the most equipped. And if you take into consideration the revenue generated by the physician, or even the potential revenue, and the needs of the business operations necessary for success, how do medical practices succeed when they're independently owned and operated and really not taking, the advice or understanding the insight that you're giving?
Well, and that's the truth is they're not succeeding. They're struggling, and they're calling in, reinforcements, right and left to help them with the process. Or, frankly, they're selling their practice to a hospital-based or larger group organization so that they can, or merging their practice with other local practices so they can try to be successful. But the truth is the most successful and the most organized are practices that have someone at the helm who pairs themselves with the physician or the clinical staff very well, and who actually can give guidance and make recommendations. I think if you want to be a solo practitioner and you want to be successful, you have to have educated, developed staff. And that doesn't mean they just go out and get a certification and that's it. You have to partner with getting them certified or credentialed with an organization that is going to give them continuing education. Because, as I said a little while ago when we were talking, the rules of the game change minute to minute in healthcare. Every day a new rule or regulation comes out. Every day we have new mandates that we have to follow. If you want to be successful and you want to be, around long term and independent, and we want you to be independent, you have to know and understand what the rules of the game are. And that's right there. That is the crux of being independent and staying independent. Understanding and knowing what those rules are. And you can't do that, as a solo practitioner or as a one physician at the helm. It has to be a team approach, and that partner on that team has to be someone who can govern the support aspects of the clinical part of a medical practice, who is highly skilled and absolutely understands the process. And the truth is, it's a minimal investment that's going to net you a big gain.
I can't even agree. I can't agree with you more on that, because now we want the doctors to be able to just doctor. We just don't want them to have to, I don't want to say worry about the management and everything that goes into that, because obviously it's their business, their practice, and they're going to, want to have some input. But, as we're really looking at this in the big picture, like you said, it's a team. But as we wrap up for this episode, what one bit of information, a tip of the trade, would you give our listeners, give physicians, that would give them a good place to start to really begin that team effort and how they can look to stay independent and thrive in private practice, what would be the first thing they should do?
I would say choose staff who have the ability to, pair well with you, that you respect, that are highly regarded, and invest in them. Take that person who you call the pseudo manager and actually give her a title. Actually give her the invest in her, because that investment is going to go a long way. The best advice I can give to physicians who are in solo practitioner organizations and who, are small group medical practices is, take that person and invest in them. Get them certified, get them credentialed, and then continue that lunchtime learning opportunity that organizations like PAHCOM give, so that every day, or at least a couple of times a week, your manager and your staff are getting educated in new technology, new opportunities, new payer responsibilities, new codes that are coming out, new definitions or clinical policies that are going to partner with you to help get you paid, so that you can continue to be independent and successful.
Well, and we appreciate all of that insight. And we're hoping to have Kathryn again on our program so she can really talk to the domains and how to get your staff certified, and then really what goes into that and diving further into those details. So, Kathryn, thank you so much for your insight and joining me today on episode 2.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
I wanted to also leave the listeners with this. The PAHCOM motto is PAHCOM shares knowledge. As you just heard from industry expert on medical management and business practice management, Kathryn Eiler, we want to remind you, too, that if you are responsible for the management of your practice, or you know a physician or office manager that is, and they want to get as much current industry information and practice management knowledge as they can, this is your podcast. We hope you will let others know and encourage them to listen in each month. As a reminder, the PAHCOM Podcast will broadcast the third Wednesday of each month. Also, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, or whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. As we head into the Thanksgiving holiday, we are thankful for all of our listeners and PAHCOM members. Make it a great day, a great month. Until next time, thank you for listening to the PAHCOM Podcast, Medical Management Radio.
Tune in for new shows the third Wednesday of each month. Thank you for joining us. PAHCOM is the professional association of healthcare office management and home of the nationally accredited certified medical manager. Professional credentials matter. Learn more at pahcom.com. That's PAHCOM.com.